Thank you, Simon. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Municipal Accountability Review Board meeting. Today is January the 12th, and the time is 10:04. I'm Kimberly Kennison. I'm a designee to Secretary Beckham. He's not able to be with us today. And I would just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and I do have a little bit of opening comments, and then I will tip it over to the co-chair, Christine Shaw, for opening comments. One of the things I wanted to mention today, you're going to see some changes that have occurred since our last Marb meeting. One being that you're going to notice that there was a little bit of a delay in our mailing, and that's because we have lost a critical member of our team for the Marb support, that being Julian Freud. So we have at OPM been trying to fill some big shoes here. And with that, Julian has not left us from the Marb. He's on the other side of the table. If we were in the room, he would be on the town side. And so I want to congratulate him and the city of Hartford for Julian's recent promotion. And they are definitely getting somebody that is excellent for their team. And so it's a loss for us. It is a win for Hartford, but we don't have to say goodbye to Julian. So I do want to thank Julian for his service with OPM and the Marb, because it was fantastic to have him on our team, and I'm glad that he's still with us. The next item I wanted to mention is that I do have a hard stop today at that 12. So if I have meetings starting at 12:30, so I do have a little room, but not much so I want to try to stay on schedule if at all possible today. And over to our co-chair, Christine Shaw, if you have any other opening comments that I might have missed.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison, and good morning, everyone. I just want to echo the sentiments regarding the praise for our former colleague, Julian Freund. It's a small world, and he's just on the other side of the table, as you pointed out. And certainly the state's loss is the city's gain. I've been designated by former Treasurer Sean Wooden, and I expect that Treasurer Russell will make a formal designation for the important work of this council. And so it's not a goodbye just yet, but imminent. And it has been a privilege to serve the citizens of this state and to work alongside folks on this council. It's really been very gratifying as one who really enjoys public service. And I consider it a privilege to participate. I want to thank you all for the incredible work that you've done for the benefit of these cities. And I want to wish Mayor Bronin luck too, by the way. It's been a pleasure seeing how the city has really just is really on an excellent path, and your stewardship, Mayor Bronin, has been remarkable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, back to you.
Thank you, Christine. So let's move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the public comment period, and members of the public are provided this opportunity to be able to speak. We're asking that the members that wish to speak, please need to be recognized by the chair, and the speakers, I'm asking to please limit your comments to 2 minutes, and that if you would like to speak, please let me know now. All right, I am hearing no comments, so I will move on to the next item of the agenda, which is approval of the minutes for December the 1st. And if I could get a motion for the approval.
So David Viller, so moved.
David,
Second.
thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Any discussion? I hear none. All in favor, please say aye.
Wait,
Aye.
just no.
Yep.
Just a quick, there's Mr. Falsigno's name is misspelled on page 3. Just a quick note.
Thank you very much for
Um,
noticing that.
Second to last paragraph on the page.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't notice that, but thank you.
All right. All in favor with the change that has been recommended? Please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstain?
I abstain. I wasn't present.
Thank you, Mark. All right. The motion carries. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is the City of Hartford. The agenda notes about a subcommittee update. We did not hold a subcommittee during the month of December. We really didn't have any work to have to tend to at that time for the city. So we will then move on to the review and a discussion of the financials for November. And the financials for the city are included in the packet. And I would ask the city, the mayor, and the Board of Ed to comment on their financial reports for the month of.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody, and Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
I want to start by saying best wishes to you, Christine, and thank you as well for all of your partnership and work, and thank you also for the very kind words.
And congratulations are in order to you because you missed our opening comments about Julian.
Oh yes, well we are thrilled to have Julian on board, and obviously I don't think we could have anybody better. So
thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies for my apologies, but we're also very excited and grateful to have him on the team. A quick summary of our period 5 projections. Last time we met, we were projecting a surplus of 2.8 million. We're now projecting a surplus of 3.4 million, so a $600,000 favorable change. We have, that's largely driven by some significant projected favorability in revenues, which I'll walk through. It is offset by an unfavorable projection in expenditures. So we have projected favorable revenues of about 6.3 million and unfavorable expenses by about 2.9. The key items under the revenue side are favorability of about 2.5 million from interest income. This is the one place where we benefit from the interest rate environment, and that has improved by about 970,000 over the last report provided. In addition, we have a $2.8 million favorability from, I think we talked about this last time, but the unbudgeted municipal revenue sharing allocation. We had hoped that we might get it, but since we couldn't count on it, we didn't budget it. And so that provides some favorability as well. And then in addition, because of the restructuring and redevelopment of the Hilton Hotel downtown, which had about $600,000 of back taxes, we also received a $600,000 payment on outstanding property taxes. Overall, on taxes, we've got we're projecting a favorability of about 330,000. I will say, we had seen very strong tax collections in the first part of the year, and we had highlighted the fact that we might see those slow down. We have seen those slow down. We don't know yet. We're going to be monitoring that closely, but we still project favorability. And then we have some modest increases in favorability from conveyance fees, various licenses and permits as well. We still have a deficit on the OT side, but we do have attrition savings offsetting that. We have a projected unfavorable expenditure variance on legal fees, and that is driven by the fact that we remain in litigation on the center plan lawsuit primarily. So we're projecting, that's not exclusively that, but that is the biggest thing. So we're projecting about a $1.8 million unfavorable variance on the legal fees line. And then utilities, for obvious reasons, are up by 800,000. I will note we were able to lock in a good longer term contract on electric rates. So this is primarily driven by natural gas, gasoline, and diesel. And, we're going to be watching very closely those lines that I mentioned, the property tax line in general, legal expenses and utilities. But as I said, we've continued to see some favorability. And I think overall, as we've tried to be each year, we're continuing to take a conservative approach with respect to attrition. I just want to give a couple of, if I can, beyond those financial projections, a couple of other updates.
Sure.
We are working. We have one labor contract that is soon going to be in negotiation, and that's with HMIA, which is our supervisors union. But we have been working with two unions to do some off-cycle adjustments. With 1716, which is the union that primarily represents our public works department, but also has some other positions, including housing inspectors. There are a few job classifications where we've just found that we are not competitive, and where they're critical functions. And so we're grateful for the partnership of the union to negotiate some job classification specific adjustments to allow us to hire and retain employees in critical functions. That includes things like housing inspectors and our more senior maintainers who are operating heavy equipment like maintainer 3s and 4s. So we will be putting that before you, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Thank you.
Similarly, on the fire side, just to give some context, and this is not a final agreement, so but I'm just giving you advance notice on it. If you recall, we've done 2 contracts with our firefighters over the last 7 years. The first one was 4 years of 0 wage increases, reductions to some significant changes to health benefits, which constitute reductions in a sense, some changes to pension, and dropped the pay scale for the younger hires by 10%. So anybody hired post that 2016 contract was making 10% less than their counterparts. In our last contract, we tried to close that gap a little bit. We gave a slightly higher increase to the younger firefighters, but the last contract was done in the midst of COVID, in the face of a lot of uncertainty, and so it was a 4-year contract with 2 1.5% increases following 4 years of zeros. And so we are seeing that, having gone from a place where we were probably more than competitive, that we do have some longer term concerns about remaining competitive. And so we are working with our firefighters to do a sort of mid-contract adjustment that would help close that gap again between the younger firefighters and the older ones. So again, we will be putting those before you. We're not prepared to do it yet, but I didn't want you to be surprised by them when they come.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members on the city side?
And may while you wait for questions, may I add one thing I forgot to add? So I think we've talked about this to some extent, but I just want to highlight that we do face a very significant threat to our all of our efforts in the city, and that is the threat to the commercial office market. A significant percentage of our tax base is large downtown office buildings. We have a very high vacancy rate in the wake of COVID, and a number of those buildings face some real threats. That threat, we may feel the impact of that in some ongoing tax appeals. Right now, there are some of those buildings that are appealing their taxes currently, and I think over the the next few years, particularly as we go toward the next reval, it's likely that we'll feel that impact even more severely. So while I want to stress, I'm really proud of the work that we've done to build a solid fiscal foundation, to lay a long-term path, to stick to our plan and exceed it every single year. That is a very significant looming threat that nobody can fully predict the scale of. And I just want the committee to be aware of that as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions from the members?
I do have a follow-up to that, Mayor Bronin. I've read how there, in light of the challenges to and the looming threats that you just described to the commercial real estate market, that there have been some really interesting efforts to repurpose some commercial real estate for mixed use or residential purposes. Curious to know if that kind of more expansive view of how to use some of the properties could if any of those discussions are underway, if that holds promise, and generally what your thoughts are with that regard.
It's a great question and a hard one to answer because the economics of conversions are difficult. I mean, I think that I would say two things. Let me just step back and give a broader answer first, and then I'll come back to the specific question. I think there is no question that the single most important thing we can do to address the hit to the commercial real estate market is double and triple down on residential development. We've seen strong sustained demand for residential. And if we don't have enough people in the office buildings to support the restaurants and the small businesses and everything else, we need people living with sufficient density that you can keep those amenities alive, so you don't have the hollowing out of the downtown, which will be felt throughout the city in many ways, including tax base. So some of that development will be infill development on vacant lots. You know, we have too many surface parking lots. You know, we'd like to accommodate that parking and structured parking and develop those lots for housing, just as we've done next to the ballpark and in a number of other places, trying to do down in Bushnell South. And we're going to continue to push hard on that. I think the possibility of larger scale office conversions holds some promise. I mean, it obviously kills two birds with one stone. It provides additional units, and it also takes some slack out of the commercial office market. And both of those things are really valuable. But every one of those deals is different. The buildings are different. Some buildings are better suited than others to conversions. And in some cases, the economics are very challenging. You know, you may have buildings that have very large floor plates, so they don't have good window access. You might have buildings that aren't, the utility systems can't really accommodate, the pipes for a bathroom in each unit, and retrofitting a building like that can be, in some cases, really, really costly. So what I would say is, it is possible. It holds promise. We're going to pursue it. It will require public-private partnerships to make them work. I don't know that there's any conversion in the city that can work without public participation in the form of, CRDA, and potentially in the form of substantial involvement by CRDA.
Thank you.
Glad it's on the radar screen. Thank you for that, Mayor.
Yep.
Any other questions? Mark, I see your hand is up.
Yes, have there been any discussions with the major employers in Hartford regarding their long-term needs? Or are they converting to more in-office, out-office work, et cetera? I mean, we've had COVID, and not a majority, but significant number of people are working from home. And so the question I would have is, has anybody sat down and talked about what their views are relative to their operation over the long term?
Sure. We've had lots of conversations. I think almost all of the large employers, went largely remote for a long, long time, and they've been sort of incrementally trying to move folks back into the office. A lot of the big employers have sort of 3-day-a-week policies where the employees are, expected to be in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and one other day. And I think my sense is that some of those companies put that policy in place, but were fairly lax about its enforcement, are now getting a little bit more strict about its enforcement. So, moving in the right direction, but moving in the right direction slowly. And I don't think there's any question that for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a very different environment than it was pre-COVID.
Thank you.
And a lot of them are also looking at, new floor plan, new versus floor plan, moving towards the hoteling or shared space models. And what that means is, in some cases, they're shrinking their leases.
Sure. All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Penn, you want to update us on the Board of Ed?
I do. There's a couple of meaningful things that I documented in the cover memo that went out this month that I think are worth discussing with the team today. Last month's report, I talked about a revenue issue that we had with our magnet operating grant. We saw about a $7.7 million decline in our projected revenue in that grant because we had fewer suburban students attending our magnet schools, and we receive about $13,600 per student for the suburban ones that attend. This month, we're seeing the opposite side of things. It's what we pay out to CREC and on special ed. So this month, I'm discussing more of a expense problem. So I'll take the CREC issue first. CREC is really two-pronged. We have 300 more Hartford residents attending CREC schools this year than we had last year, which caught us by surprise. We weren't expecting that magnitude of a change. In addition, this is the first year of a 3-year increase that CREC is doing for its tuition. $900 per student this year, $800 incremental next year, and then a $700 increase the year after that, which means over the 3 years, they're increasing their per pupil per year cost to us by $2,400. And I say to us, but it's every other district that's sending to CREC as well, right? To put that in context, that translates with the additional students into a $4.7 million hit to us for this year and an $8.4 million hit to next year that we're now factoring into our budgeting for next year. In addition, we've seen a major uptick in our special education transportation costs to the tune of about $7 million in that budget line. We've got favorability in other transportation lines of about $2.5 million that reduces the overall impact in transportation to about $4.5 million. But $4.5 million this year, we certainly expect to continue into next year, because what's happened as we got to root cause around this issue is that we've seen for more and more of our special education students having door-to-door transportation written into their individualized education plans, or IEPs. That's a phrase you hear come up quite a bit in special education. It's a legal document that outlines what the school district is responsible for in providing for that student's education. So you take the three of those together, $7.7 million in a hit in revenue, $4.7 million this year due to CREC, $4.5 million due to transportation, and all the other stuff that typically goes into your normal operating costs in terms of inflation. And what we're seeing right now is a potential general fund deficit of $12.7 million for 22-23. And that's after an assumption of $8.6 million for vacancies and use of our $5.6 million non-lapsing account. Now, what I will tell you is that also carries forward on those costs into next year. So right now, the budget that we presented to our board as an initial starting point was a $24 million deficit for 23-24. Big numbers on an absolute basis, but I would point out that $24 million is less than 6% of our operating budget, right? So if I was an optimist, I may say to you that the glass is 95% full. So either we need a bigger glass due to raising revenues in some fashion, or we need to shrink the amount of water going into the glass by contracting our expenses. That's the analogy I've used internally here. I will tell you for this year, we're probably conservative on the vacancies, and we're in the process of remeasuring that now that December payrolls are finalized. We also know that we believe we have an upside in revenues that we didn't plan for in terms of tuition that we charge to other districts for their special education students that we educate here in our schools. And, you know, on a more immediate basis, we're also now implementing a freeze on new hires in our general fund, unless, and I stress unless, because as I did with the 2 public meetings we had on this week, it is a classroom-facing instructional position, right? So we're not looking to say you can't hire a teacher, you can't hire a paraprofessional delivering instruction in classroom. Everything else is getting a freeze and a hard look as to whether or not we need that position right now. And that's twofold. One, it's to try to mitigate the deficit that we're recognizing for this year. Second, it preserves the vacancy as a potential elimination from the budget going into 23-24. Because if we hire that position, it's no longer a vacancy. So that's sort of initial steps, and there was a lot of conversations with the board, both in the finance committee meeting on Monday and in their public workshop meeting on Tuesday, with a lot more work to transpire over, say, the next month or so around working this issue down. And as a starting point, for instance, this morning there was a meeting around what do we consider classroom facing, right? What exact positions do we say really provide instruction directly to the student that would fall into that category? Now, I think it's important to note, now I want to say it here in a public meeting because I said it in the other two public meetings as well. We're not talking about a RIF. We're not talking about impacting people that are enrolled currently right now. Because again, there's 450 vacancies in the budget for next year. And we turn over 400 and some odd people every single summer due to retirements, normal turnover, things along that line. So between the vacancies and normal attrition, I'm pretty confident this gap can be solved. But what we do need to document for our board, and I'm happy to share it with this body when the time is right, is what do we think we're going to have to stop doing and what's going to have to get paused as a result of not having the staff in place. And I'll take a very personal example there. I've got 4 vacancies on my team right now, 3 of which are in the general fund. 2 of those are very much production-oriented positions. In other words, we don't have that position there. Stuff will either stop, slow, or can't be done. And I've got to think about how do I restructure that in a way that makes sure I have a minimal impact on the staff I already do have. Because what I don't want to do is create a wave of turnover as a result of layering on additional work to the staff that's already here. But those are the kind of conversations that are being had right now, in addition to all the non-personnel conversations where we're reviewing every outside contract that we have and saying, do we need this? Can this stop? If it does stop, what's the impact? So there's been a kind of a burst of activity, sort of, let's say, between the last time we got together in December and where we are now, both in terms of what we've seen deteriorate in the budget and sort of what we're working on as a response to that. And I'll pause there and take questions.
Thank you for that summary. Any questions from those members? I don't have anything to start with. Yes, Mark.
Can you refresh my memory on how you deal with the excess cost? Obviously, the state reimburses for excess costs. I think you said last year, and I may be mistaken, that somehow the city who gets the excess cost grant gives it back to the board in some fashion. In other words, what was your excess cost for last year from the state? And does it come back to the board? Because you're supplying the services this year, you don't get any money for that until next year. So how does that figure into the operation?
Excess cost grant comes directly to Hartford Public Schools. The piece I was referring to is if there's an audited change in the excess cost grant, either up or down, it's actually the educational cost sharing grant that gets adjusted as a result of that the following year after the audit's completed. So that's probably what I was referring to in that case. And I would tell you that we budgeted about $6 million for the excess cost grant for this year, and we're coming in at about $6.75 million, and that's already factored into our outlook. Remember that for the excess cost grant, by and large, unless it's a DCF placed student, we have to hit a hurdle rate of 4.5 times our net current expenditures per pupil to get any kind of reimbursement under that grant. And what's happened is they've started including expenditures that we have out of ESSER into that calculation. So even though they gave us the money for ESSER, it's now impacting what that 4.5 times hurdle rate is that we have to get to before we see a reimbursement on a student from the excess cost grant. And remember that those reimbursements aren't dollar for dollar once you hit that threshold. The average for the state has been somewhere between 72 and 80%. Well, pretty much for as long as I can remember, and I've been in municipal finance, right? So it's not 100% reimbursement even after you hit the threshold.
Yeah, historically, there's always been that argument of how many times do you have to, it's a matter of balancing the state budget for that. But they're going to, the way I read it now, they're going to be discussing all of those issues in the hopes that there can be a more equitable way of funding the excess costs of special ed other than exists right now. And hopefully that'll benefit the major urban areas that are impacted the most by special education costs. But those are discussions that'll happen in the halls of the legislature.
Exactly.
But the impact obviously is significant. We've talked about that in the subcommittee several times, and how you are able to project or price out, quote unquote, an IEP is something that maybe legislatively can be done or maybe policy-wise can be done within the cities and towns to say, okay, the IEP is X. Well,
Yep.
what does that mean monetarily?
Yeah.
I mean, you're now picking up children at their doorstep through an IEP, which I understand if it's necessary and the IEP calls for it, you have to do it. It's a legal document, but there's a financial impact to that. And I'm just not sure that, as you know, well, I don't know if you know, but when they sit down for IEPs, I'm not sure that they consider the fiscal impact of things, which they shouldn't. It should be programmatic focused, but there should be some at least reference to how does this impact the costs for educating that child. Not that you're not going to do it, but at least you as the CFO will have a handle on what does it look like financially, so there are no surprises.
So it's just to follow up on that point, Mr. Waxenberg, we've had conversations now with one of the law firms in Connecticut that actually specializes very heavily in special education law to find out exactly what our rights are on some of these things and to say, how do we try to mitigate this going forward? Because you're exactly right. It's a programmatic conversation that happens at the PPTs, but some of the issue is the impact is coming through our residents that participate in open choice in all the different districts around the state. We don't have personnel to sit in all those PPTs to say, hey, does this decision really make sense, or are we doing it as a matter of convenience, right? To say, is the decision really in the best interest programmatically for the child, or because the open choice district knows they can pass the cost on to Hartford, does that become an easier decision for them?
Exactly.
Thank you. Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions, Phil. One is, does Hartford have a student-based budget in which you've got a scenario where sort of the money is following the child? And where I'm going with this is, if you have 300 students or 300 more students in CREC programs than you thought, I assume you have fewer students in your in-district schools. And I'm wondering whether you are looking at, making any adjustments, not to take money, quote, out of the classroom, but so much as simply adjusting for lower enrollment in those cases where it's a, significant reduction from what you might have budgeted in terms of enrollment.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton, good question. One of the things that we have in place, and we've implemented it now for the 22-23 budget, and it's our planning tool for 23-24, is what we call our equity-based starter budget. And within that, it looks at the student population within a given building, around the resources that should be allocated to theirs, and it takes into account some of the specialized populations within that group. It could be multilingual learners, it could be special education students, things along those lines where we know the need is higher. But there's also a component of that budget process that looks at the actual count of students and gives money to that school on a per student basis. That becomes discretionary for the principals and their school governance councils to decide what's in the best interest of the school to operate going forward, and knowing that those are sort of unique from school to school. So there is an element of that actually is incorporated into it. But to take your question just a step further, right? It's like, we know that we've been facing declining enrollment for several years now. And the last time there was a major consolidation of schools in Hartford was in 2016-17. What becomes difficult is if we take those 300 students as an example, right, and they're equally divided among the 39 schools that we have, it's 7.5 kids per school, give or take, right? And so there's no real opportunity to say you have a staffing change that reflects that decline, unless it happens to hit in the exactly right grade and that type of thing. But that's something that we look at typically every October to say, is there classroom consolidation opportunities within a given school? To look at those kind of things. So long term, there's probably other decisions to be made in terms of footprint. I just don't know that we're there yet for 23-24. And as you might expect, in a larger urban district, that's a process that will take anywhere from 12 to 15 months to 18 months to really pull off correctly.
And just a sort of a broader question in terms of your projection. a general fund deficit of 12.7 million is a pretty big number.
Yep.
I'm sort of gathering you're expecting to whittle that down, hopefully substantially, but by the end of the year. But I guess my question really is, since you're part of the City of Hartford's financial reporting entity, if you were to end the year with a deficit, that would flow to the City of Hartford essentially. And so my question is, are you expecting to fully whittle down that 12.7 million by taking steps to mitigate it, or do you think that you're likely actually going to end the year with an actual deficit that's material?
I mean, I guess just to put some context around the 12.7, that's 4.4% of our general fund budget, right? So again, big number, but in the context of a $284 million general fund budget for us, I want to kind of relay it that way. To more directly answer your question, though, I've never ended a budget in a deficit, and it's not my intent to start here. So we have 6 more months to earn out the remainder of this budget. And that's why we're taking steps now to make sure that we don't wind up in that place come the end of the year.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Mr. Hamilton, if I can jump in, Leanne Rawls, Director of Finance. The Board of Ed also has a 2% reserve on the balance sheet of $5.6 million. And they also have for fiscal 22 an assignment of fund balance of 1.3 million to address any needs that they need in fiscal 23. So there are some reserves available for the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Phil and the city. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is non-labor contracts. And the first non-labor contract, it's for review and any discussion. There is no action to be taken on this. The first item is the Compass Peace Builders contract. And I think that we can all recall that we have seen this contract before, I think a few times. And the city has presented in the past at detail what this contract is about. So this particular one, it's not an amendment. It is a contract for, wait a minute, do I have that right? In the summary, it is a contract that's going to have a term from July 1st of 22 through June 30th of 23, and it's for $300,000. I don't think it's necessary to go into details unless the board members feel differently, as I'm comfortable with this contract, but would want to hear from the members to make sure that they are in agreement with that. And anyone's thoughts? Or do you feel that we need a summary on this particular contract?
We've seen this before, you're correct, and it's
We have.
fairly standard.
It is.
So I'm comfortable as well.
I am too. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you for being here to present on this, but we can then move on to the next contract, which is the Hartford Next Incorporated contract. And this contract is to provide administrative and engagement services to Hartford for neighboring revitalization zone program for FY23. A summary was provided in this particular for this particular contract. It's actually combined with 2 different services for a total of about $105,000. And I'm not certain whether this is a new contract or not a new contract. I have to apologize, and you're going to see that the contract was not included in the package, and I'm not positive if it was provided and it was a mix-up on our end as we're, again, trying to fill some big shoes, or if this was just to provide a summary. So I'm going to tip it to the city and ask for a little bit more information on this particular contract.
Good morning. So this contract, this is a new contract.
It is. Okay.
It is a project that was specifically funded for Hartford Next out of the FY23 budget.
Okay.
And you described the major components there. The full contract was not provided typically for contracts under $250,000.
Okay.
Summary information has been
Thank you.
provided.
Thank you.
And
I do not have any questions on the contract as the two services are running in, 50,000 each, and it all seems reasonable. Does any of the Marb members have questions on this contract? I see none. All right, thank you. City of Hartford. We shall move on to the next agenda item, which is the City of West Haven. Mayor, I did see that you were able to be in attendance. Oh, Mr. Bronin, are you leaving?
Yes,
Mayor?
just saying thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't want to move on too fast. Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Mayor Rossi. I wasn't sure if you were able. I know that there was a challenge, but I'm glad to see that you are with us today. As far as the subcommittee is concerned, we did not hold a subcommittee this past December, but there was a lot of work that transpired, and between the Marb OPM staff and the city, as the Whittlesley contract in that group has hit heavily within the city of West Haven. I was going to give a quick update on that before we then move on to the monthly financials and let the Marb members be aware that Whittlesley has done a lot of on-site visits in the month of December. I know that they started in November and really hit heavy again in December, and that their focus has been on procurement, cash disbursements, and human resources. And they have begun to collect an inventory of the policies, procedures, and creating a matrix of the status of those items. And those policies and procedures are preliminarily focused on the finance area, IT, and HR. And they're not just working within the city, they are also working within the Board of Ed. So that's great news for us. They're also at this time, as they have to, started to do walkthroughs, did selections and doing walkthroughs of the process, following the paper, meeting with the individuals, and documenting that process. And in doing that, they're also finding that there is a need already as they look at the procedures and providing recommendations that is requiring some additional write-ups. So I want to let you know that in that process, we will be receiving some write-up recommendations of the procedures, is what I've heard from Whittlesley as an update. I followed up with City of West Haven as well to make sure that things were running smoothly, but I'll let them comment on that part of the project and make everyone aware that where we're at. There is one area that was delayed a little bit, which is IT data security and evaluation. We needed to make sure about security measures, and I believe that has just recently been resolved so that now they can move forward with the IT side of their review. Mayor, would you or Mr. Jackson want to comment, or Matt, on the Whittlesley project and how things are going concerning their review and assessment in the team? Nope. Okay.
I'll jump in. It's been it has been a lot of work, as you mentioned, Ms. Kennison, but it's what the late representative from Georgia would call good work. It's an opportunity for us to have another fresh set of eyes, and we really look forward to having the results. We have spent a lot of time with the folks from Whittlesey here in finance and in purchasing specifically. I know Mr. Spryer has spent a lot of time with Whittlesey walking through, and we've set Whittlesey up right outside of my office actually, so that they can have direct access to myself and Assistant Finance Director Taylor and our manager Lisa Pershino-Smith. So that we can try to be seamless and timely in responding to their requests. But it's been a good several weeks with Whittlesey.
Thank you. All right, that's what I had for the update as far as this subcommittee or what occurred. The next item is review and discussion of the monthly financials for the period of the fifth period, which of November. And the financial reports have been provided in our materials, and I'll ask the city and the Board of Ed to provide us with some update on their financials.
Thank you. I'll give it a start if that's okay.
Please. Please.
If that's at the last meeting, we're asked to provide some projections. So I think the first item in your budget are those projections. We have tried to be conservative in how we projected this. We looked at both pre-pandemic and pandemic era expenditures and revenues and timeliness of those, and factored those into the projections. We looked at certain items that might be subject to inflationary pressures. We'll probably see, later today, 6.5% year-over-year increase in certain goods and services. So we try to capture that. And the way that we dealt with personnel was we took all personnel expenditures through the end of period 5 and assumed that we would hire every vacant position at the highest rate for the rest of the year. So we feel that we have done a conservative estimate of personnel as well. So if we look at the items of note on the revenue side, tax collection continues to perform in line with prior years, and we're anticipating collecting 101% of the budgeted amount of $105.1 million. Licenses and permits are a little bit below, specifically in building department, but we are aware of 4 multi-million-dollar projects that are going to want to be permitted in spring of 2023. So we said 3 of those 4 projects, let's include it in the projection, leaving that 4th project as conservative space for better results. Interest income, as Mayor Bronin said, interest income has been dynamic based upon 2 factors for the city. One is the interest rate increases that everyone has participated in, and also because we have a much larger corpus of actually cash funds available. We're generating a lot higher interest on a larger corpus of funds. And so we are projecting interest income. The projected income for interest at the time of the budget, generated about 12 months ago, was $52,000. Last month, December, in our STIF account alone, we earned $111,000. So we are, in order to be conservative in that regard, we are projecting an aggressive expenditure of ARPA dollars, which are included in that corpus. And so instead of pushing those ARPA expenditures over sort of the lifetime, we advanced those expenditures as a methodology of reducing the corpus and coming up with a projection on that. But we're projecting $973,000 versus $52,000, which is what was budgeted. We held federal and state grants at the budgets that were provided, and all other revenue silos are at either 100% or less of budgeted projections. On the expenditure side, using the methodology I expressed earlier, we are projecting 94.8% of budgeted expenditures. Contractual services, we increased based upon pricing models, inflation-based, where we think we'll expend 101.8% of budget. Fixed charges, we added, again, inflationary numbers to that to project 108% of budget. and other contingency. We actually reduced other contingency by $500,000, which was identified for sort of potential COVID-related clawbacks. We have had, as you have no doubt read, had some favorable court decisions that include restitution, as well as additional work with CONRESNIC and OPM to resolve some outstanding issues. So we believe that our exposure in that area is reduced. So we reduced that by $500,000. And this projection includes that the Board of Ed will expend its entire allocation of $89.9 million. When you put those all together, we are looking at, we're projecting a total revenue over expenditure of $1.14 million. Obviously subject to change and updating at each subcommittee and full board meeting. Some of the bogeys that continue to exist are obviously inflation. That's one. Two is we've had a very mild winter. So weather-related potential expenses are something that are always important to keep an eye on. And if you look at both sides of California, it's not just the snow, it's the snow and it's the water. Given global climate change, weather is not what we used to think of it maybe 20 years ago as just you got a budget for the snowstorms. You have to budget for sort of all weather hazards. So that's a bogey that's out there. Utilities, and I'm going to throw into utilities the collection of municipal solid waste as a necessary function of the city. Obviously, the state is careening toward a real trash emergency. The city of West Haven has tried to get in front of that with a diversion program for food waste. And we'll start to get some numbers on that at the end of January. So we'll be able to report on that and modify the projections based on such, but it's certainly something that we're looking at. And finally, as a self-insured entity, there are always concerns about workers' comp and general lap losses that could contribute to poor performance. So those are the things that we're keeping an eye on. On that last one, I think we're going to start taking a little bit more of an aggressive posture with our third-party consultants to not only review current case status, but really look for state-of-the-art prevention mechanisms so that we can forestall the types of large claims that may put the city at a disadvantage. So that is the projection. I'm happy to take any questions on either the projection or how it's formatted or anything else in the monthly budget report, the munis reports that you're used to getting.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I do want to, oh, I'm getting an echo. Hold on, let me see. Somebody's causing my echo. I want to see if I can mute them. Oh, good, it went away. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, okay. It sounded dead, like like it wasn't turned on at all, my microphone. Thank you for updating and providing the board with a projection. It's been some time since we've seen projections. I know that Mr. Hamilton had asked for that at our last meeting, so I do appreciate that you listened to the advice of the board member and did provide us with some projections for the first time that we've received, probably in maybe over a year. I know it's over a year. So this is helpful for us to receive. I see Mr. Hamilton's hand is up, so I'm going to give him the floor.
Yeah, I just really wanted to, thank the city, Mr. Jackson, and also I noticed on the Board of Ed side we had a written summary as well.
Yes.
So I really do think that both the city and the board have, listened to what we've asked for with these projections. I think that is really a key component to understanding where you are and keeping track of, where you're going. So I just want to thank you for that. I think this is, an excellent, advance over where we were before in terms of monthly reporting.
I agree. Thank you. One format change I would ask if you could please, at the bottom of the projections, can you just give us the P&L? I know you verbalized it, but I don't know if your report, I'm assuming that you're dropping this into an Excel or something like that. And if you could just list what that surplus or deficit is at the time of your projection, so I don't have to be lazy and have to calculate it anymore.
Absolutely. And any
Thank
other
you.
suggestions on formatting or anything else, happy to take so we can perfect this and make it easy for everybody.
Thank you. Any other questions for the city on their financial reports for the month of November? Tom, are you still have another question? No? Okay. And okay, let me move over to the Board of Ed and ask Mr. Cavallero to please give us an update on the Board of Ed.
Sure. So through period 5, we are projecting to spend our budget fully. That's kind of been the order or the talk of our Board of Ed, spending our budget completely to meet our needs. The two key areas that we are constantly monitoring, and Hartford touched on a lot of it earlier, and I'm sure every other Board of Education is facing the same questions, is special ed tuition and transportation. It seems everything we're doing to combat these rising expenses, we are struggling with. For an example, 2 years ago, we had 135 students outplaced in private schools, or specialized schools, I should say. We reduced that to 118 students last year, and our expenses still went up close to $1 million. So that's something I'm working very, very closely with the People Services Department with. They understand that, financially, this is our biggest risk to our budget, but at the same time, I think we all know that they can't make all their decisions based on finances. So it's something we're working with. We're partnering with ACEs every chance we can. We're able to kind of minimize our transportation risk with them. They've put in place a regionalized based transportation model where they're doing the bidding, and they're trying to consolidate routes where we can, where a student from West Haven might be on the bus with a student from Milford going to the same school, if that's allowed. I think the other areas you'll see in the budget is our building security and photocopy services. Those line items do appear to be fully expended in our general budget. Those two line items are co-funded, or those two expenses are co-funded within our general budget, our Alliance grant, and for building security, our ESSER COVID funds. So now that we've fully expended the general fund, we'll start to hit those other allotments. But other than that, we are right in line with where we've been historically through period 5, and we don't see anything on the horizon to move us from that.
If you plan to use the ESSER funds to help with the publications and the photo, as you mentioned, being fully the budget being fully utilized, that would be a transfer to adjust those that would have to come forth?
No, they were
no?
budgeted. It was part of our application to the State Department of Ed to include additional building security to help the social distancing between arrival and dismissal. So we have an additional security staff at each one of our schools. So that was part of our plan. That was an approved use of the funds. So that shouldn't be a transfer.
Okay. Mr. Brockman's joining us for the record. Thank you. Any questions? Maybe before I ask the members, one thing that I would, you mentioned the photo, and you did mention the building security. There are some other, oh yeah, no, those were the two items that I had highlighted as well. I'm sorry, you commented on it. I knew that I had marked them up, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I had more than what you had just highlighted. Great. Any questions from the members? Yeah, Mark. Mr. Brockman. I'm sorry, Waxenberg.
On the severance line item, significantly overspent. How do you deal with that? I know in certain school systems, they require a staff person to notify them prior to a certain date for their retirement or whatever to gain their severance pay. And if they fail to notify by a certain date, then there's a penalty. I know that's been negotiated in several contracts, but your expenditure is obviously, it looks like you transferred money, $275,000 to cover. I assume that's teachers for whatever the contractual obligations are. And you obviously don't anticipate the same because it's budgeted to be similar to what it was prior to the over expenditure for this year. So is that just a blip on the screen, so to speak? You had a lot of teachers this year?
Yeah, we had basically double the amount of teachers that we normally have retired. So are retired or resigned or was eligible for the severance pay. It's something we're monitoring in future years, which we'll probably have to increase the budget, as that seems that's kind of the trend. We're seeing more and more teachers retire and more and more open jobs in the profession. So it's something we're monitoring. I think this expenditure was unique because we average about 15. That normally suffices in that $300,000 budget. We got close to 30. So we do have our eyes on that line item.
Yeah, it appears to be a trend, at least as far as resignations and retirements are statewide. The student activity account was overspent also, yes. But I think you mentioned that.
Yes. That's temporary overspent. The city council passed a resolution to allow $100,000 to the Board of Education of their ARPA funds to allow for summer employment of our students within our schools. It was decided that we would incur the cost in our budget, and when it was completed, the city would transfer the funds over. I'm working with the ARPA committee right now to provide the backup that they require, and we should see that reimbursement very, very shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Kennison, may I jump in on the board side for just a moment?
Yes.
As it pertains to teachers, I just wanted to credit the Board of Education, Superintendent Calvararo, for working with WTNH to promote a job fair for teachers and educational folks yesterday, where there was a good attendance, and it's just an example of how they're trying to address the item that Mr. Waxenberg brought up in terms of making sure that there's adequate staffing for the students of West Haven.
Great, thank you for that update. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Cavallaro, for that update. The next item on the agenda is to review, discuss, and possible action on non-labor contracts. The first item contract, non-labor contract, is Diversified Technology Consultants, which is a Beach Street roadway improvement. It's contract amendment number 3. Since this contract was originally signed back in 2015 and amended a couple of times, we originally received the summary on the Beach Street, and I needed to get some more background. So we did do some follow-up, and that was one of the reasons for the delay in our mailing. And to get the original contract, which was included in the package today, as well as the 2 amendments, because all of these items transpired prior to West Haven being under the oversight of the Marb, and so that we could get some background on this particular contract. I'm now going to reach over to the city to please give us an update on what's going on here, because it was a little bit confusing to me to really understand this project and where we stand. So, Mr. Jackson, do you have somebody that will be updating us on this?
Yes, we agree. This is a critical project, but given its length, when we reviewed it again late yesterday, it became very clear to us that for members of the board to be able to follow this, we really need to have a little bit more narrative document. So we would like to withdraw this for consideration today, draft that document, and present it to the subcommittee.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion to table the diversified technology non-labor contract from this agenda?
Motion to table.
Thank you, Sal. Can I get a second? I'm sorry, I didn't get.
It was
David
Miller, second.
Thank you, David.
Seconded. Sorry.
Any discussion?
Kim, Bob White, I'm
Yes.
in favor of it. I would just ask the city to make sure they include whether any of the people involved in the consultant has any ties with the city.
Thank you.
As
Mr.
they've
White.
done in the past.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. White. That is part of our practice now. So
Thank you. No, I knew that, and I was pleased about it.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries to remove this from the agenda today. The next non-labor contract that is up for our review, possible discussion, and possible action is the Comcast service agreement with the city and for the Allentown Fire Department. Now, this particular item that has been put forth is, as I view it, a utility contract, and it was my understanding that when we built the Tier 4 policies and procedures, we did not include any notion that we wanted to see utilities, and felt that those ongoing budgetary expenses, such as utilities, would not come forth. I just wanted to have a discussion about this before we decide whether this contract needs, if the members wish for this contract and such contracts to come before this board. It was my understanding it was not. Now, if this was a contract that was including some kind of infrastructure change versus regular monthly billing, then that would be something different that would have to come to this board. But it was my understanding when we built the policies and procedures for the Tier 4 that we were not going to, we agreed not to see these. But I want to make sure that I am accurate in that thought. Members?
This is Sal Luciano. I think if it's a routine bill, then I would agree with you. If this is something exceptional, then I think we would take a look at it.
Right. And it's a 3-year contract, I understand, but it has monthly billing for internet. And that's, is that what we want this board to review, those type of contracts? And I didn't think we wanted to do that.
From my perspective, I agree with you, Ms. Kennison. I don't think it's necessary. If you have contracts for day-to-day operations, upgrades, things of that nature in the area of utilities, that's one thing, which I don't think this committee needs to see. If you're talking about new construction and or new programmatic impact for the city, that's a different issue. But to me, this is an upgrade, if you will, to an existing, it's like going from 4G to 5G, whatever that means.
Exactly.
So I don't have a problem with that.
All right, could I get a motion then to remove this contract from the agenda today?
Feliciano, so moved.
Thank you, Sal.
Second, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, the motion carries. This has been removed from the agenda. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is for the town of Sprague. They provided their materials for the monthly financials for November, and that information is included. I do not have any questions or concerns about the financials that have been provided. Does, if any of the members do, they could say so now and or bring it to our attention, and we can let the town of Sprague be aware. All right. Moving on to the other business, and under other business, I want to turn the floor over to Mr. Egan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just take a moment to let my colleagues on the board know that today is my last meeting. I'll be resigning from the Marb effective basically subsequent to this meeting. I've accepted a job at OPM in their Office of Labor Relations, which I will be starting tomorrow. And I just want to say for the 5 years that I've been here on this board, it's been quite a experience. It's really certainly allowed me to work with such talented folks as we assisted these municipalities. I think we've made great progress. Certainly, there's more work to do, and so I want to give recognition to my colleagues and everything they bring to the table. I'd like to thank Kim and Julian, if you can hear this, for I don't even know how to say it. I mean, you really are such a strong backbone for this board and a resource. I don't know where we'd be without you guys. And thank the secretary and Ms. Shaw for their leadership. I'm certainly going to miss working with Hartford, especially working with West Haven. I'll probably miss them more than they'll miss me. But it's really been a great experience, and I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you, Pat. Really, thank you, and congratulations to you, Pat. You will be missed, and definitely your input and your knowledge and expertise that you provide in so many different areas has been helpful. And so again, you're not leaving OPM, but the Marb. But I don't know if you'll ever disconnect. How's that? I don't know. We'll see. we might have some other discussions, in the office about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. One last item that I wanted to mention is that I do want to thank the members again. Happy New Year! And we do have a lot of changes that are going on with Julian's shoes to fill. The position has been posted, and the search went out prior to the holidays, and it's actually already closed. So we'll be going through that search to fill that position. In the meantime, I want to thank Bill. I want to thank Simon. I want to thank Mike from my finance team at OPM, who has stepped up and provided additional support to this board and going above and beyond to attempt to try to fill some critical shoes on our team. So again, thanks to all of you for your patience and understanding, because we are scurrying around, and I hope that we can get the towns to provide the information a little smoother, because we don't have that luxury of having Julian, who could follow up, over and over again with the towns to get the materials and get the stuff out on time. So it will get a little stricter. as my first time putting this packet out with this team, it might be different next month should Mr. Beckham be chairing this, and that we'll definitely have to get these materials out quicker. So it will probably be turned into yes and no's of what will be included and versus not. That's my last. Any other items for discussion? Oh, Mr. Fossigno.
Yeah, I just wanted to wish Pat
Yes, please.
all the best going forward. And it's been my honor to get to know him. And I think I think your insight is interesting, forthright, and usually, in fact, most times on point. And I always look forward to your next question. So good luck in the future.
Thanks, Steve.
Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, I also wanted to offer Pat my congratulations. It's been, pleasure working with you for these years, and wish you the best and good luck in your new position. I do have one business item that I just wanted to go back to just so I don't forget it. And that is on the Comcast agreement that we just discussed at West Haven for the subcommittee, next subcommittee meeting. I'd like to get an update from West Haven on whether or not they have applied for E-rate to cover any internet related services. The E-rate program serves both public schools as well as public libraries. And I just want to get an update from West Haven whether or not they've availed themselves of that funding opportunity to offset some of their costs in that area.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Ms.
I
Shaw.
have a question / comment, and it relates to the list of pending requests for materials and information.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I extend a great deal of grace to you and your team.
Apologize.
It is it's a lot. These packages are a lot, and I think again, the thoroughness of these hundreds and hundreds of pages of materials that we review for these meetings, they don't compile themselves, so to speak.
No, they do not.
But I would like to recenter the city of West Haven's attention on those pending items because we'd like to continue to track progress with that compliance. So it ought to be a standing agenda item for not just the subcommittee meetings, but I think the full Marb ought to know of the city's progress.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Steve, you have your hand up still? Or is a new comment?
Nope, sorry.
Nope, you're fine.
Sorry about that.
Alrighty. If we have no other discussion, then last item on the agenda, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Luciano.
Thank you, Sal. Somebody hit it in the background for a second. Was that you, Pat?
Yes.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Pat. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Pat's last act.
Exactly. It's his stamp. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.